Hello, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Communication Connection. I'm Victoria Bailey, and stopping by for conversation today, he is an award-winning journalist, a native of the Magnolia State, and of course, a Mississippi State alum, Mr. Quentin Smith. Quentin, it's so good to see you.
So great seeing you too, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, of course. So, first things first, you work in our state capitol right now as a multimedia journalist. Let's take it back a few years.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about some early influences. What got you interested in storytelling, journalism in general?
So believe it or not, my dad, he is a reporter. And so, of course, growing up, I wanted to be like my dad. So I went to work with him every day, shadowing him. And at that time, I had no clue that I wanted to be a reporter. I was just wanting to spend time with my dad. And I thought what he did was a really, really cool job, going out, interviewing people, going to different events and covering different stories. And so the more I continued to shadow him and go to work with him every day, the more he started to teach me about the basics and fundamentals of reporting. And I slowly but surely started taking an interest into it. And so by the time I got to college, it was a no-brainer. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And this is all because of the seeds that my dad planted into me at an early age. Good.
And so now talking about college, early experiences, things that kind of contributed to who Quentin is as a professional now.
Well, of course, the prestigious Mississippi State University and their broadcasting program. Of course, I took Take 30. And so just going through that program and going through the communications department, it taught me the basics of everything I knew. It taught me how to write a story, how to write an intro, the who, what, when, where, and why. And then taking the different classes, I learned how to work a camera. I learned on-camera presence. So Mississippi State's communications department and the Take 30 program taught me everything I needed to know. And once I left Mississippi State, I then went to do grad school at Kent State. And so everything that I learned at MSU, I was able to take to Kent State. And what I learned at Kent State was just like icing on the cake. And then from there, I was fortunate enough to be able to get a job at WCBI. I'm from Tupelo, Mississippi, so working in Columbus, which is roughly 50 minutes away. I was fortunate to get a job, I guess you can say, in my hometown, somewhat in my hometown. And at WCBI, everything I learned at Mississippi State and Kent State, I was able to apply it and was able to just hit the ground running. But yeah, it was all based off what I learned here at Mississippi State, getting that foundation of how to report.
Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about it. You've been in the field for a while now. What has been your favorite or most memorable story you've covered thus far?
That's a tough one, because I feel like I've covered so many stories, but the ones, now that you ask me, the one that stands out the most, a few years ago, I did a story about the Tougaloo Nine, and what that is, a group of 9 then college students at Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. They were protesting because they wanted to be able to sit and read at the local Jackson library, but they couldn't because of the color of their skin. And so for the very first time, they held a protest by going inside the library to stage what they call a read-in. And they read the books, and of course, they were only there for maybe 5 minutes, and then the police came and escorted them out and took them to jail. But because of their stance that they took, the Jackson Library was then able to be integrated. And so more than 60 years later, I was able to connect with those individuals and meet them, and was able to tell their story about how their courageous efforts, their protests led to people like me and you being able to go into the Jackson Library. And I still have a great relationship with them to this day, because even after the story, I was able to still connect with them and just have a great conversation. So that story stands out the most, just because I feel like those are some unseen heroes that help pave the way for some of the privileges that we got here in 2025.
Of course. And so you talked about working in Jackson. The largest, hardest network, or rather DMA, you could be in the state. Talk a little bit about what it's like covering our state and legislative news.
It's a lot. Things move at a fast pace down there in Jackson, because like you said, it's the state capital, so all the laws are being made there at the state capitol. So whether you're covering politics and covering the legislative session, going to covering the local government, the city and county business, And also just covering the day-to-day events and things that are happening in Jackson. Things move at a fast pace. You got to be able to pivot from one story to the next story real quick. You got to be well versed in all areas, know how to cover politics, know how to cover a general news story, know how to cover a feature story, know how to cover breaking news when that happens, because that often happens a lot in the Jackson area. So it can be tough, challenging, and demanding, but if you truly love this business and you want to grow as a reporter, I feel like the Jackson market is the place to go, because you're gonna be thrown, a lot is gonna be thrown at you, and it's like sink or swim, and so you got no choice but to sharpen your craft. And so it's busy and it's a fast pace, but I love it.
Good. And so, of course, as I mentioned before, you're an award-winning journalist. Talk a little bit about some of your accomplishments, what it means to you to be able to be recognized in that way.
Yeah, I mean, of course, being rewarded for your work is always a great feeling, and I just think back to the people who helped me get to where I am now. Although it's my name on the award and it's me being called up there to receive the award, I also think back to my family, my pops, my professors here at Mississippi State, everybody who played a role in me. The first news director who gave me a job, Robert Davidson, him for even giving me a start in this business. So as much as I like receiving the awards and receiving those accomplishments, to me the biggest accomplishments are the impacts that I have on people. Like, for a prime example, like a few weeks ago, I did a story about this Jackson family. Their loved one was killed years ago, 3 years ago, and they felt like the city of Jackson, the police department, wasn't doing its job in helping them get the answers that they needed. And so what happened was, unfortunately, somebody dropped the ball. And so I was able to use my platform to connect her with the police chief and connect her with the lead investigator on the case, and they were able to reopen the case and help that family get the justice they need. So to me, those are the real accomplishments, knowing the impact that you're having on people and knowing you're bringing a change to your community.
And so you talked about impacts in the community. You've also spent time in the classroom applying your impacts there. Talk a little bit about how it is kind of giving back to the younger generations of future journalists.
Yeah, and that's real rewarding as well, because me once being in their shoes, you know, I kind of know what'll grasp a student's attention, because I was once in their shoes. So whenever I teach the students, you know, I try to make sure the lesson, of course, is fun, but also still educational, and make sure it's not nothing that's like over their head. It's still something that everybody can grasp and understand what I'm saying. And also try to just show them like why this news business, it is a fun business. It is an important business, but it can also be very rewarding. And so the same tools and things people taught me here at Mississippi State, I try to pass that same knowledge on down to them. And I'm hoping that once they graduate and they get into this business or become teachers, they'll take what I taught them and pass it on, and we'll just keep the cycle going.
Exactly. So continuing the cycle, what advice for anyone listening who wants to get into journalism, multimedia journalism, storytelling in general, what would you say to kind of get them started?
I would tell them to first make sure that this is something that they really and truly want to do. You know, a lot of times people will see anchors and reporters on TV, and they just see the glitz and glam and think, okay, I want to be a celebrity, or I want to be famous, or I want to be in the know, I want to be popular. But this business is much more than that. It's about telling stories, holding people accountable, getting answers. And so I would say, first off, make sure like this is something that you truly, truly want to do. And once you find out that this is something you want to do, spend time developing your craft, you know, spend hours, you know, studying other reporters, other anchors who you think are really good. You know, practice your writing, practice your shooting, practice your stand-ups, your on-camera presence, whatever it is, whatever area that you want to go in, whether it's behind the scenes or in front of the camera, practice sharpening your craft in that area, and I think you'll be good to go.
And so that kind of leads me to another question. Students I talk to regularly are interested in getting involved but don't know how to necessarily. They're still students. They don't necessarily have the years of experience. What would you say, I guess, to those students who have that desire and know that this is for them, but kind of are having a hard time getting started?
Yeah, I would first off say do an internship. You know, before you graduate college, do an internship, whether it's at a local TV station here, or if you're from another state or another city, a local TV station in your hometown, and during that internship, develop connections with the news director, the assistant news director, with the producers. And at that internship, you will learn the day-to-day operations of reporters and producers and what's to be expected of everybody that's gathering the news content. And also while you're there learning, also develop relationships, because just because a producer is working here in Starkville, they may have a contact with somebody elsewhere, like in Alabama or something, and that station in Alabama may have an opening, and that producer may refer you to that job. So I would say start off with an internship if you can, and while you're there, try to develop as many connections as you can, because though you may not be able to get a job in Starkville or Columbus, maybe you'll be able to get one in Louisiana or Tennessee somewhere, and you can get your start that way.
Very true. And then do you have a favorite journalist?
A favorite journalist, of course. I have too many to name. At the national network level, Lester Holt is somebody I always look up to. Tom Yamas, Jerika Duncan. I watch their work all day, every day, just because I feel like they are like perfect. Like everything they do, from their writing, their on-camera presence, everything. When it comes to the local level, of course, the wonderful Miss Andrea Self.
Oh, yes.
Grew up watching her. I know she's no longer in the news business, but just I can still go back and watch some of her old stories, and I can still learn a lot from them. And I like that she was a really great writer. She was real personable. She showed compassion in all of her stories that she did. So I try to take things that they do and try to incorporate that and sprinkle that into my reporting skill set.
For sure. And then what do you have coming up in the future? What are you working on? What are you gearing toward? Yeah,
so I'm working on a Black History Month feature story next month. This July of this year will mark 60 years since Dr. Richard Holmes integrated Mississippi State University. And so I'll be getting a chance to not only interview, but meet with him and just to talk about what that historic moment was like, and just to talk about the challenges that he had to overcome, to make that moment happen, and to just talk about the impact of his integration 60 years later. So that'll be coming up in the month of February. And so I'm looking forward to not only just doing that story, but also just meeting an icon and a living legend in Dr. Holmes.
Absolutely. Well, Quentin, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you all so much for joining us as well for this episode of Communication Connection. We'll see you next time.